From the Cactus KCTS FM Phoenix, I'm Jamison Greenwood with Greenwood and Company. Well, I hope everybody's had a good last week of January and is happy that we've begun our first day of February. Pretty exciting. Valentine's Day will be here before we know it, and I'll share a Valentine's Day episode with you later on. I was thinking more broadly about romance and how many people who get started in the writing of poetry do it to impress a romantic interest, and it led me back to the story of how I got started as a poet, and I'll admit that it was very much about Annabelle, whom I met at Brubeck's coffee shop in the Arizona high country, and it just seems so silly now, but when I think about my first poetry slam, I wasn't thinking a lot about poetry, but it was really about Annabelle, and even though I'd barely met her, I knew I'd be devastated if I didn't win her over, and that was all I was thinking about. Who was going to win her over, and what was someone going to do that might lead me to look bad? So, well, let me just explain. You've probably wondered what experiences led me to develop my annoying habit of sharing stories and poems on the radio, thus making this program a little less torturous for you to listen to. It is my hope you enjoy this show, but if you don't enjoy it, I really would appreciate you keeping that to yourself. So, to make you a little less annoyed, I'll discuss how I became a poet, how I became friends with Colton and Heather, and how I came to fall so deeply in love with Heather's cousin, the lovely Annabelle Thaxton. I first met Annabelle my freshman year at Brubeck's when Colton was tutoring me in algebra. She had flowing lemonade blonde hair, skin like fresh fallen snow, and an athletic form. The tank top, jean shorts, and red and white Keds sneakers weren't the most glamorous outfit, but her natural beauty made them look almost royal. The red beaded bracelets she wore on each wrist matched her tank top and sneakers, showing she was partial to red things, while the instrument case she carried and the pendant in the shape of 2/16 notes she wore on a necklace showcased her passion for music. "Caramel macchiato, Annabelle?" Colton asked. "You bet, Colton. This is Jamison," Colton motioned to me. "He's in the math class I tutor." Annabelle came to where I was standing, reviewing the Brubeck's bulletin board, as we took a break from quadratic equations. My bespectacled eyes were reviewing the sign-up sheet for a Thursday night poetry slam, then were distracted by Annabelle's green eyes and cheeky smile. Flirtatious, yet almost maternal. The type I dreamed someday would be the first thing I saw every morning, and the last thing I saw before bed. "Do you write poetry?" asked Annabelle. I nodded. "Are you going to read at the poetry slam?" I had not planned on it, but Annabelle had so much hope in her eyes, and I couldn't dare to disappoint her. "I think I'll just watch," I replied, telling the truth, yet still fearing I'd crushed her, "to figure out which of my poems would be a good fit." I feared this couldn't possibly be a good enough answer to soften the blow, but Annabelle gave me the same sweet smile. Though I asked if she wrote poetry, she shook her head. "I'll be at the slam, though. My jazz friends are going to play some music between poets." "You play saxophone, right?" I asked. She nodded, and Colton came back with her order. Annabelle grabbed her small black purse and removed 3 $1 bills to give to Colton, instructing him to keep the change. "Gotta bounce," Annabelle explained, retrieving her saxophone case to leave. "Later, Colton. Later, Jimmy." While Colton set about grinding more Arabica beans to fill my coffee, I studied the bulletin board, pondering poetry and Annabelle. With the burning image of her smiling sage-green eyes refusing to leave me alone, I changed my mind and wrote my name on the list for the next Brubeck's Poetry Slam. Later that week I thought of Annabelle and her beautiful smile as I walked from my room at Tatum Hall toward Brubeck's coffee shop. It was early November, and the aspen trees were turning their sweet tinge of crimson, while the oak leaves were turning the color of tangerines, decorating the ground like an avalanche of cheddar and sour cream potato chips, along with maybe a few Swedish fish. It was just before twilight, and the neon signs of the bars, art galleries, and tattoo parlors were beginning to illuminate, as cars parallel parked and packs of students and alumni returning for their honeymoons walked along in sweatshirts, jeans, and beanies. In a panic, I feared I had forgotten the poems I brought for the slam and patted my chest pocket to ensure I could feel them. I took a cue from the leaves, writing a poem which described their beauty, along with a sonnet on a bookstore, and a narrative poem which I titled A Night in Chicago. There was also a backup, Best Days, though I felt the other 3 were more solid. After combing through them in my journals, I typed them in 12-point Times New Roman font in Microsoft Word, then printed them on Xerox paper so there was hope that I could actually read them when I got to the stage. 5 minutes later I entered Brubeck's, and though it was the same size as I had always remembered it, it felt smaller with all the aspiring poets and their friends and dates sitting at the tables, the counter, or on the couch and chairs of the conversation pit. They all drank iced mochas and lattes with whipped cream and wore a variety of eccentric outfits. Some channeled Jack Kerouac and Fonzie with leather jackets and jeans, others wore Birkenstocks and tie-dye shirts, and one wore a plaid skirt and had short hair dyed lime green. She carried a book with a cover depicting a felled tree, which struck me as odd, though maybe she was an environmentalist like Colton. Each poet had a unique personality, but they still made me feel like an outcast. A traditional hot coffee drinker who came dressed in a black suit, blue shirt, and plaid tie, along with argyles and black loafers with tassels, made me feel like a Baptist preacher in the middle of a casino. Well, what do you do when you feel like you're in the wrong place? For me, the fight-or-flight response kicked in, but before I tell you which way I went, we have to take a short break, but we will continue with this story in just a moment. You are listening to Greenwood and Company on KCTS. Valentine's Day is coming soon, and Hobbs Wellington department stores have incredible deals for that special someone. For the man in your life, get a nice pair of Hobbs Wellington wingtips in black, brown, or spectator with brittle rubber soles that slide off when walking uphill. Buy one for $150 or get two for $250. Available in the men's department. If you need something for that special lady in your life, buy a bottle of Naranjada Mujer, our exclusive perfume for the Hobbs Wellington woman. It smells like sunscreen mixed with expired orange juice, but you'll know she thinks of you when she wears it, even if the thoughts aren't all that positive. Available in a half-liter bottle for only $500. And if your car could use new tires and an oil change, stop by our auto center for a complete tune-up prior to your Valentine's Day. Your car won't last much beyond that when we're through, but we'll make sure it gets you the best performance for that special night. For all these great offers, visit your local Hobbs Wellington department store. 8 locations throughout Arizona. Welcome back. You are listening to Greenwood and Company on the Cactus, KCTS. Now, as I mentioned before, when I saw the other poets, I almost wanted to turn back, considering the way I was dressed, but up on the stage I saw Annabelle. She wasn't looking my way, but as she stood up there assembling her tenor saxophone, the light streaked her lemonade hair and the sleeveless scarlet dress she wore, along with the shiny leather of her black boots. I caught the side view of her green eyes, and though I had to turn away before she saw me, her eyes convinced me to see this through. The first poet was Amanda, a bohemian sort of girl in John Lennon glasses, a pink tank top, tie-dyed pants, and a black vest with fringe. Her hair was a deep red, long and fluffy, and resembled Ariel's bouncing around beneath the ocean. "This is for all my girls out there," Amanda began. She then removed her phone from a pocket of her vest. "This is a man's vest," she explained. "The girl's model didn't have any pockets." From her phone she read, "We want pockets in our clothes. We want clothes that actually fit. Down with alterations, down with sizes just too big, or just too small." This feminist treatise would mean so much to my mother and sister, who often complain about the dearth of options in women's clothing, and the poem ended dreaming of a world that would never know sexism. In the corner of my eye I witnessed Annabelle placing her hand over her heart before applauding Amanda. My hope was she would enjoy my poems, but they weren't overtly feminist, and if they weren't overtly feminist, Annabelle would never love me. Amanda shared 2 more poems of similar subject, and I lost confidence with each one. All of her poems were not only serious, but they were also free verse, without any clear structure in rhyme or rhythm. One of my poems describing the leaves of fall that I mentioned earlier was free verse, but my other ones were more traditional. Yet so far it seemed the sacred tradition at poetry slams was resisting tradition. The second poet was a blonde-haired California skateboarder named Ross. His muscular build, faded jeans, and Vans t-shirt made me fear he would steal away Annabelle. She was from San Diego. Surely they would hit it off. Ross's first poem described a friend, Brendan, who somehow broke his kneecap while doing a fakie, which is a skateboard move, along with volunteer work that Ross did for children with autism. I was still afraid he'd steal Annabelle until he began to describe Kendra, a girl whom he loved. If he had a past love, he wouldn't be as ready to pursue Annabelle, and there was still hope I could have her all to myself. Then, as the poem continued, I began to suspect Kendra was not his girlfriend, but his mother, then his grandmother, then possibly his great-grandmother, before he finally revealed who Kendra actually was. A 2007 Nissan Altima. The audience erupted in laughter, now catching the subtle cues throughout the poem, making you want to read it to ensure you could understand it. Ross was the poetic equivalent of the comedian Stephen Wright, and channeled further that frizzled-haired comedian leaving the stage with a deadpan, "Thanks." At that moment Annabelle took the stage along with her two friends, Dana Cruz on the drums and Chris LaCroix on the piano. As we waited for the second half of the poems, Annabelle shared the audio acrobatics of her saxophone on classics such as Climb Every Mountain from the Sound of Music and My Life by the Beatles, to signature takes on Ocean Eyes by Billie Eilish and Sunflower by Post Malone. Her eyes were either closed or focused in concentration on that golden musical scepter she ruled, but as I watched her, I hoped she'd like my poems and soon like me, feared she'd hate them and run off with some guy like her piano player Chris LaCroix. I mentioned earlier that when I walked in I noticed one gothish poet who wore a plaid skirt and had short hair dyed lime green. She approached the stage as Annabelle, Chris, and Dana finished their set, and introduced herself as Ivy Clare. "These poems are vignettes of my life, and of your life." She began a poem in her tree-felled book describing a bowl of chocolate ice cream that had melted, and called it "An Ocean of Tears," and "Diarrhea of the Heart," which made the room go silent. Diarrhea is a rather amusing word, but in this context it was grotesque in a negative manner. This poem went on before a variety of snaps. Soon she went into her next poem, a discussion of an abandoned phone book at the bottom of a yard sale box, the friends we had abandoned or the ones that had abandoned her, ending with the book being thrown in the recycle. I suppose this could have brought some hope of being turned into new paper, but then she described how it will likely be burned away. In every poem presented, she seemed determined to anticipate every hopeful message one could think of and find a way to crush it. But still she received applause. Once Ivy Clare finished, I pulled myself, my poems, and my black Stafford suit up to the platform, and pulled the typed copies out of my chest pocket. My plan was to start with my fall poem, but to counteract Ivy Clare's war on hope, I started with Best Days, which I've shared on this program before. 'Tis a part of the human condition to assume our best days are behind. Though the past is now gone, it brings comfort, future worries envelop our minds. This poem discusses many of the worries of the future and longing for the past, but notes, the future holds many a blessing, to assume this is false is but blind. This elicited applause, as did my romantic narrative, A Night in Chicago, written in the Dr. Seuss style of anapestic tetrameter with an AABB rhyme scheme. Before long, all the poets had presented, and the vote was called. Not surprisingly, Ross won first place regarding his ode to his old Nissan, Amanda got second, and Ivy Clare got third, which I guess was somewhat a just dessert. However, I was shocked when the host called, "Honorable mention for Jamison, Best Days." I ran up and got the coveted ribbon, a blue piece with silver writing, surprised that anyone would see my work as meaningful, though to Colton and Heather this thought made absolutely no sense. "That was the best poem out there tonight," Heather said. "And you did a great job summarizing the story of that night in Chicago," Colton added. Annabelle was up on the stage with Chris and Dana performing their swan song of the evening, a version of Dream by Johnny Mercer. after which she came up and congratulated me on my work. "You're just so talented, Jimmy," Annabelle said. "Well, maybe I'll even get third place next time," I replied. "Are you silly?" Annabelle shook her head. "Someday you're going to get first place. You've got to share more often, not just here. Share everywhere." I wasn't sure if Annabelle saw the same magic in my hazel bespectacled eyes and short brown hair that I saw in her green eyes and flowing lemonade hair, but the fact she saw something in my poetry gave me hope, not only for my talents being put to good use, but that someday Annabelle and I might be one, the long-married couple who fell in love one night at a college town coffee shop. You're listening to Greenwood and Company on KCTS. You know the value of Prince and Popper microwave popcorn. How it gives you that old-fashioned homemade taste while helping you 86-year-old microwave. Available in 3 different flavors. The cheddar flavoring is probably just a mixture of salt and ground-up orange tissue paper, and the kettle corn's probably a mixture of high-fructose corn syrup and lead-based paint. But even if its origins are questionable, it's nothing against that incredible taste. Prince and Popper gives you that old-fashioned feeling sharing popcorn and a friendly night with a good movie and good friends. And maybe if you're lucky, you'll get to stay home the next morning with the violent upheavals that Prince and Popper brings along with it. It's the perfect solution when you need an excuse to miss school or work. Why wait? Pick up a bag of Prince and Popper microwave popcorn in original, cheddar cheese, and kettle corn flavors. Prince and Popper microwave popcorn may contain allergens along with venom from poisonous snakes. Consult a physician with a revoked license prior to use and do not store near heat source or flammable materials. Can also double as kindling for your fireplace or barbecue grill. Prince and Popper microwave popcorn. Available at Giggets supermarkets and other subpar retailers. Support for Greenwood and Company and the Cactus KCTS comes from the Society for Cats with Mathematics Test Anxiety, the Save the Floppy Disks Foundation, and the Folding Chair Charitable Trusts. Well, I think I would have forgotten my manners if I didn't share with you one of the poems that I presented on that night when I won the Poetry Slam, so I am going to close tonight with the narrative poem, A Night in Chicago. On a clear summer night at a club in Chicago, where a jazz violinist stood playing his bass low, and faux Edison bulbs lit the ceilings above, 2 lonely jazz fans would soon fall in love. There he entered this club, a young guy in a suit, and a tie and a hat looking irresolute. As he sat at a table and ordered a drink, he looked stressed and unsure of just what he should think. At the counter there sat a young girl of his age, and her beauty soon locked up his eyes in a cage. She had a red dress and had ebony hair. Though he knew he should not, he continued to stare. He went up to the bar, took his drink and sat down, and glanced first at his beer. 'Twas a miserable brown. A sweet feminine voice then asked, "Why the long face?" He looked up. She was smiling at him with such grace. They ordered 2 daiquiris, sipped them and talked. He learned she resided a mere single block away from his home in the same neighborhood. This was great, but he struggled to know where he stood. When they finished, he asked, could he escort her home? He hoped it was warm so they'd have time to roam. But the air was quite chilly, their walk home was brisk, so he feared she was too cold to take a big risk. But they stopped at her door and arranged then to meet at the same club they met at, the same time next week. Then she lifted her arms, and she held him quite tight. He was just glad enough till she kissed him good night. That brings an end to this week's Greenwood and Company. Our show was created and hosted by yours truly and was written by him along with James Salison and Minnesota Martinez. The engineer is Ivan Crosby. Jonas Andrews answers the phones even though we don't take calls on this program. The theme was composed by Martin Landstrom, and our costumes are provided by Grandma's Garage Thrift Shop. All the characters, settings, and situations depicted in this program, along with all advertised products, are entirely fictional and any similarities to products, events, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Also, KCTS is not an actual radio station. Be sure to visit our website at JamisonGreenwoodPodcast.com to learn more about Greenwood and Company, and make sure to follow us on the podcast platform of your choice and share with your friends on social media. Just a reminder to please be careful if you are going out on the 101, the 17, or Route 66 tonight. I'm Jamison Greenwood, and until we meet again, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay young at heart. Good night. This is KCTS FM Phoenix. Stay tuned for Lacking in Substance.